Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Good morning. It's a little hot today. I am really bad at praying out loud on the spot. But I really do admire people that can put language to the feelings on their heart and speak it out in such a beautiful manner. It just takes me a lot more time to compose my thoughts, and then I'm ready to go. And this is the reason that I love prayer books. I have a really marked up Book of Common Prayer, a beautiful Benedictine prayer book, and a pocket St. Augustine prayer book. And I love these because they never fail to have the language that I need that's going to resonate with my soul that day. The prayers that I fall back into that feel like home to me are the prayers that are most often said with the rosary, and more notably, the Lord's Prayer. The first few months I spent as a new dad holding Harper in the middle of the night, I would say the Lord's Prayer here and there, partially to stay awake, but also because I was overwhelmed with gratitude and anxiety, all at the same time. The Lord's Prayer for me is so powerful because it connects so many of us. It connects straight back to the earliest days of the church, to my grandparents, and to our sisters and brothers across the way in the Mandarin service. It's a guidepost and a welcome place to find yourself if you're ever in a service that's in another language. Now, I would love to be up here and claim that I learned the Lord's Prayer as a little boy, praying each night before bed. But this is far from accurate. No, I learned the Lord's Prayer by heart because of the sacrament of confession. At San Gabriel Mission Elementary School, we went to confession once a month. And as a teenage boy, I racked up kind of a record, if you will, amongst the priests. Our 7th grade class would file into the empty church on a Wednesday, and there were 2 priests on duty. And if you were lucky, you got Father Dennis, the head pastor of the church, always super friendly, and a real softy when it came to penance. If you weren't lucky, you got Father Pica, who I'm sure was a lovely man, but always was a grump. And guess what? I always got Father Pica. The penance breakdown worked like this. Bad language set you back 6 Our Fathers and 4 Hail Marys. Missing church on Sunday, that was 8 Our Fathers and 4 Hail Marys and 4 acts of contrition. Any pranks or mischief, a full rosary and 4 acts of contrition. Also, he didn't like that we did not head to confession more than once a month. So just for fun, he regularly slapped on a couple extra Our Fathers, just so we would learn our lesson. Confession was always before lunch. So of the 25 7th graders, you would see half of us, I'm saying us, praying away at the kneelers, atoning with Father Pica's penance, while the rest headed for the playground. I knew those words backwards and forwards, but I didn't actually know the words. I didn't actually know what I was asking for. One scholar has described this section of Luke as deceptively simple because on the outset, it seems like a run-of-the-mill day with Jesus and the disciples. Jesus is praying, and the disciples ask him to teach them how. This all seems pretty simple. But what Luke is setting up here has some incredible depth and, moreover, some bold implications for us. First, the nature of God is revealed to us. God is a great parental figure whose presence is breaking into our world and being revealed through Jesus. We are sustained by God, by bread, each and every day. Some translations even read, bread not only for today, but enough also for tomorrow. Then we ask God to forgive our shortcomings, our debts, our transgressions, much like a loving parent would forgive and reconcile with their child. And in the same breath, we are to forgive those around us that are indebted to us, those that owe us, those that have wronged us, and those that would do us harm. The language of debts here speaks directly to the culture of the time, the culture that carry out a continuous cycle of repayment and debts for things you would do for one another. In this system, it was unlikely that you would ever be square with someone else or ever be on equal footing. Jesus, with this prayer, is telling us that we are to forgive all debts we hold, no questions asked. And no questions asked. Last, we ask for guidance when our lives are tough and trying. We again trust in our God to deliver us in these moments. The words taught to us that we are bold to say are an invitation to relinquish the world around us and find beauty and rest in God. A few years ago, I was working at Claremont Presbyterian Church, and we took a bunch of students up to the mountains for a winter retreat. And these were amazing weekends. Each adult leader would take a subject and present a session about it. The last session of the weekend, one of the new leaders began their talk. And about 5 minutes in, they stopped and they closed their eyes and began to pray. Prayers for Thanksgiving, for the opportunity to serve that weekend, praying for safe travels, and praying that we all recommit our lives to Jesus. And then at that moment, she invited people to an altar call for people and students to physically move and kneel and pledge their life to Jesus. This threw everyone off guard. And what's more, no one moved. See, altar calls aren't really typical in the Presbyterian setting, so students didn't know what exactly to do. And with the adult leaders, some were uncomfortable. A few were angry and left. And the rest, myself included, kind of just stood there, didn't know what to do. Our presenter stood there in earnest and in a very vulnerable moment. But when no one responded to her invitation, after a minute or so, she walked out of the room. It was silent and it was awkward in that big room with 60 junior high and high school students just staring at us. A good friend of mine, Reese, walked up to the microphone. In the most loving way, he asked us to consider our preconceived notions about what prayer should look like. He asked us to consider what an invitation to move together and to pray with one another could look like if we shook off our anxiety and let ourselves be vulnerable and let ourselves trust in God. And with that, he simply invited students to move and find a prayer buddy and just listen to each other. And with that, people moved, gathered, and spent a good while experiencing prayer in a whole new way. Now, I can't judge the practice of an altar call one way or the other, because it's never been a part of my context of worship. But I know people that find an experience like that life-giving. But I can judge my reaction to an experience that feels weird because it doesn't look like what I'm used to, because there's no rubric for an experience like that. And I have to ask myself, am I still the kid trying to get through prayer experience as fast as I can so I can get to lunch? Or do I need to slow down and listen to what God is revealing to me? When I open up to morning prayer, there's a structure and a format that feels like home to me. I know every inch of it. I know exactly where it's going, and I find peace in that. But with that, there's also a risk of being complacent. What I do know is that prayer is central to the life of Jesus. And if I'm to be that disciple I am called to be, then prayer needs to be the center part of my experience. I also know that Jesus calls us to be persistent about our prayers. And in that persistence, it will be revealed how God is working in our lives. People call the Lord's Prayer the perfect prayer, and it shouldn't ever change. And arguments wage over language and translations and inclusivity. In fact, there's a wonderful project out there that invited church leaders to write new versions of the Lord's Prayer. And they are really beautiful. I personally love the version of the Lord's Prayer in the New Zealand Prayer Book. And even to throw more gasoline on this fire, Pope Francis actually last month changed and approved a new version of the Lord's Prayer to be used, causing even more uproar. I think in all this that it's more important that we seek God out in prayer no matter what it is, more so than the exact words that we're supposed to use. Amen.